Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the launch of the London Housing Commission report. I'm delighted that we have so many people here this morning, literally standing room only. My particular thanks to the three mayoral candidates for joining us today in what I know must be a very hectic schedule. Can I also thank IPPR for establishing the Commission and asking me to be its chair, my fellow commissioners for their tremendous work, the supporters of the research, Catalyst Housing, Mears Group, Poplar Harker and Nationwide Building Society, the sponsors for today's Savills, and, last but very definitely not least, the many people, including many in this room, who contributed their thoughts and ideas to the report. Our report comes at a time when London is facing an unprecedented housing crisis. The stark statistics set out in our report make this case clear. Average house prices are now 12 times average London pay. This is the highest that this ratio has been since the information was collected. It effectively puts home ownership out of reach for the majority of ordinary Londoners. Mortgage home ownership has consequently fallen by 12% in the last decade. That's an extraordinarily big shift. London house prices are now 45% above their pre-crash levels. That compares with just 5% in the rest of the country. Those who are renting are also struggling. Whilst weekly wages have gone up by some 2% in the past 5 years, rents in the capital have gone up by 16%. The economic and social consequences of this housing crisis are severe. Our Commission heard evidence that businesses were struggling to recruit and retain staff. There was increasing overcrowding in social and rented homes, and there were increasingly high levels of housing-induced poverty. The political ramifications are equally clear. When we began our commission last July, housing was an issue for the London mayoral elections. It is now, without doubt, the issue. The Commission concluded early on that without concerted action, the crisis would get worse. London will need to find homes for an additional 1.5 million people by 2030, with household growth estimated at 50,000 per year. This pressure would be eased by stronger regional economies outside the capital, but the impact in the short and medium term is likely to be small. Equally, fewer empty homes would also help, but not much. There are at present only 22,000 long-term vacants in the capital. In reality, there is no alternative to building a lot more homes of all types and tenures. How big is the challenge? Well, our calculation is that London needs over the next decade to build at least 500,000 more homes, or 50,000 a year. This is in fact in line with what all of the three mayoral candidates are saying. Against this ambition, we are falling far short. Last year, only 25,000 new homes were built, and in the last decade, only 194,000 homes. So the Commission set itself three exam questions. What would it take to double housing output over time and hold it there? What can be done to tackle growing affordability problems in the capital? And how can we provide a better quality private rented sector? We drew in a wide range of expertise from the housing sector: house builders, planners, housing associations, London boroughs and homeless charities. Each one generously provided us with a weighty volume of evidence on these critical issues, together with ideas about how we could fix them. From this process, we concluded that there is not a single root cause to London's housing malaise. Rather, there are a great many barriers: land and planning, investment and skills, funding and regulation, each of which must be confronted to get London building to anywhere near the levels needed. Specifically, we found there is too little land identified in the London plan. We are some 15% short of what is needed to deliver the required 50,000 homes per year. But more than that, we also rely very heavily on larger sites. 68% of land identified for bigger developments, 68% of the earmarked land for housing is on bigger developments. Many of these are complex and need big infrastructure investment to be delivered. We found also that there is plenty of public land that could be freed up, but that it is taking far too long to get this land to market. Planning departments have been scaled back due to spending reductions, and too few approvals are being given. While there are over 200,000 homes approved, much fewer are likely to be delivered. Many are on the large complex sites that I just referred to, and some are simply traded rather than built out. Too much of planners' stretched time and resources is spent on lengthy negotiations on planning gain, with dwindling affordable housing gain to show for it. Investment in new housing is insufficient. The Mayor's office estimates that around 16 billion is needed to get to 50,000 homes a year. Last year, around 8 billion was spent, and new orders appear to be falling sharply. New sources of funding for a wider range of tenures will be needed to unlock more cash. Too much reliance is put on private sector developments for sale. While private providers are now hitting near record levels of delivery in the capital, the public sector has largely left the stage. Having been the provider of some 20,000 new homes a year in the 1970s, the boroughs last year built just 285 homes. Housing associations have played a vital role in filling the gap and can do more. Builders of homes for rent are also growing, but the sum position is that London boroughs need to be given the opportunity to do far more. There are also major skills problems. The sector has a looming retirement issue, and we are training around half the workers needed to deliver 50,000 homes a year. Now, turning around decades of undersupply will take time. Time to build up the capacity of the development sector, time to identify the additional land needed, and time to build a consensus across government. But work must start immediately with what the next mayor and the boroughs can do now. Our report finds that there is much scope here. However, and this is a key point, it was abundantly clear to the Commission that the powers and resources available to the Mayor's office and the 33 London boroughs are simply insufficient to match the scale of the challenge. The new Mayor and the boroughs must therefore make a bold and comprehensive offer to the government to deliver the 50,000 homes a year by the end of this decade. Half of these should be affordable homes for rent and shared ownership. They should also commit to deliver the skilled workforce needed to design and build them, and to eliminate the unacceptably poor conditions in parts of the private rented sector by 2025. In return for this commitment, the government should give London the financial and other powers needed to deliver this. Specifically, the government should make the London plan the MPPF for London. Lift the current borrowing constraints on both the GLA and the boroughs to fund infrastructure and new homes. Strengthen London's revenue base by allowing it to retain all or part of its stamp duty income in exchange for adjustments in grant funding elsewhere. Permit a discretionary charge equivalent to the lost council tax income on unimplemented planning consents. Devolve decisions on planning fees and area-wide licensing. It is absurd that decisions on whether boroughs can introduce licensing currently lie with the Secretary of State. But the Mayor should not wait for this deal to be done. In our report, we set out a plan of action for the Mayor to consider on taking office. Specifically, the new Mayor, working closely with the boroughs, should give the London Land Commission permanent status and expand its resources to identify all brownfield land opportunities in London, public and private. Create an enhanced and multidisciplinary placemaking team, that word is crucial, within the GLA, with expertise in planning, design, finance and delivery. This team should also offer support to TfL to review the potential for increasing housing density around key transport sites across London. It should also refresh and revise London's policy on housing density generally. Support local communities to conduct their own neighbourhood planning to identify both the small sites for development and the major opportunities for regeneration. Engage the tenants in their future. Review the scope for housing development on greenbelt land near public transport sites, in exchange for offering improved community amenities and greenbelt protections for other areas. So a trade-off. Offer public sector landowners the support of the London Development Panel to turn public land sales into new homes. The key issue is capacity and agency on public land. But this should be subject to a proportion of that land going for new affordable, certainly, but also for private rented. We propose a covenant to protect parts of public land for private rented. Directly commission housing on appropriate sites through housing associations and private developers. Establish a London Planning Inspectorate charged with supporting and monitoring borough planning departments. Do a deal with the housing associations in London, and I should declare my interest as chair of Peabody, to double their housing in exchange for a pipeline of new sites. They have made the offer. The candidate should grab it with open arms. Crucially, consult on establishing a London-wide affordable housing tariff. Our research found that what happens now is a massive delay, huge costs with experts, lawyers and others negotiating the toss on this. The lawyers and the experts swap sides for the next negotiation. This is not a way to go forward. And last but not least, launch a London lettings hub to link up tenants directly with good quality accredited landlords and offer discounted letting fees to landlords who make available longer term tenancies, provide more certainty for their tenants. Let me just conclude by saying that London's housing problems are soluble. It is possible to build a lot more good quality, sustainable, affordable homes in London than we are doing at the moment. But, and this is the crucial but, this will not happen without radical measures of the sort we set out in our report. It is simply not going to be good enough to hope for the best. Carrying on as we are will not be enough. There needs to be a London-led, long-term strategy. Our Commission doesn't claim to have all of the answers. There will be more things to do. But we do believe that our proposals will make a real and positive difference. The time to act on this is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to help respond to this fascinating and hugely important IPPR report. I should say it's the London Housing Commission report, as well as the IPPR report. Look, I'm standing to be mayor to take this huge success we've seen over the last 8 years under Boris Johnson and make it work for people across the board. And I'm standing on a platform, above all, to deliver more homes Bob is absolutely right. That is the preeminent issue now for the next mayor, for the next decade. But not just more homes, better transport, safer streets, and a cleaner, greener living environment. And addressing the housing crisis is undoubtedly the most challenging, the most pressing task we face. When a person on an average London salary is struggling to get the keys for their own home, that is a real problem. When a person on double the average London salary is still struggling to get on the housing ladder, that shows us just how stark this crisis has become. Now, London's population is going to hit 10 million in the next decade, and we are currently only building around half the homes that we need if we're going to close the gap between supply and demand. The next 4 years will be make or break for London, and we cannot afford risky political experiments. We are running out of time to get this right. So I'm standing to be mayor so that more Londoners on average salaries can get the keys to their first home. And I'm clear that the only way we're going to do that is by ramping up the number of homes that we are building. So I've committed to building 50,000 homes a year, which is roughly double what we're seeing at the moment. And to do that, as your brilliant report emphasises, London does need to get a better deal from government. Our city generates huge wealth for this country, and yet we hold on to just 7% of the taxes that we raise. London is the greatest city on earth, but the truth is that we have to go cap in hand and beg the Chancellor for the funds we need to ensure that we have the transport infrastructure we need, the houses we need, and the policing we need. I agree with your report's key findings. We need to keep a greater share of our tax take, and that is why it is critical that we have a mayor who can get a good deal from government. Now, one proposal that I've made to the Chancellor, and I continue to make, is to trial a stamp duty uplift zone system on new tube and rail routes. Now, what that means is that TfL would pay for the new transport links. I don't know who the protesters are here for. I think that, Bob, is it you? You should maybe go and talk to them. I think you should go and talk to them.
After you, Zach.
I might. What it means very simply is that TfL would pay for the new transport links needed to unlock the brownfield sites, and in return, London would keep a share of the increased property taxes that would arise directly from that investment. That would enable us to be much more bullish, much more ambitious in our plans. So more money for London matters, and I will stand up for Londoners to secure the new powers that we need. But more important than money is land. Now, I've spoken to many housing associations who, incidentally, I agree, Bob, do a magnificent job here in London. And they are clear, money is not the issue. The issue for them is land. And yet land is the one thing we know the government can provide. But in the public sector, there are huge tracts of brownfield land which is not being developed. The NHS, the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Justice all own vast tracts of brownfield land. And we need that land released so we can help more Londoners onto the housing ladder. And I will work with government to ensure that that happens. But I also agree with you that the mayor needs a new deal with local government. London has had borough building targets since the London Plan was first created, and yet those overall targets have never yet been met. So as mayor, I'll work closely with the boroughs to draw up new targets, and I'll then hold those councils to account to ensure the targets are actually delivered. But I'd be cautious about being seen to railroad local elected councillors. There is an implication sometimes that local councillors don't understand the housing crisis, and I don't think that is true. The truth is that every single council I've spoken to, of all political persuasions, understand the issue and are up for building more homes. But what they lack is land, they lack planning support, partly for the reasons Bob has just mentioned, and they lack ready money. So as mayor, I won't just hector the boroughs, I will do everything in my power to help the boroughs as well. I'll lobby government for more money to support local planning teams. I think that is essential. I'll lobby government to allow councils to borrow in order to build. And I'll set up a team in City Hall to provide expert support. And I'll support existing plans, emerging plans for a pan-London housing fund. I want boroughs to be able to work more closely together than they do today. And the proposed fund as it's currently described, would allow boroughs to pool their land and their funding and their borrowing powers in order to build new homes for Londoners. And I want to see more councils directly commissioning new homes themselves. So I think the next mayor needs to support councils as well as holding them to account, and part of that support involves understanding the political pressures that local councils face. And I address directly the point that Nicholas Boys-Smith has just raised in his question. We will not sort the housing crisis if we ignore the needs and demands of local communities. Yes, we need to build more, many more homes, but we need to build them better as well. Over the next decade, a city the size of Birmingham is going to have to be built right here in London. So this is an opportunity for us to avoid the failed mistakes of the past. We don't need to build concrete alienating towers in the sky. Let us build now a London rooted in the people and the places that make this city great. And that's why, as mayor, I would give a cast iron commitment. I will not build on the green belt. I will not back developments that are out of keeping with the local area. I won't accept polarized developments which support only social housing on one side and market housing on the other, and absolutely nothing in the middle. Londoners on average salaries are being priced out of their own city, and I want to see genuinely mixed communities. I want to see developments which look more like the London we all love. And that brings me to my third point. London communities need a new deal with developers. Few people in this room, I suspect, would disagree that the current viability process is broken. And some local councils set fantasy affordable home targets that are impossible to meet. The developer then submits an impenetrable viability assessment. The mayor, or far, far worse, the unelected National Planning Inspectorate comes down on one side or the other, and all parties have wasted huge cost, caused huge bad feeling to end up exactly where we are today. So I wholeheartedly agree with your report. We need a new approach. The solution that you have proposed in this report is a tariff system, a set percentage of affordable homes right across London. But such a proposal, I believe, is fraught with political difficulty. If you set the tariff too low, then communities feel that they're being cheated. If you set the tariff too high, if you insist that 50% of all homes on all developments are genuinely affordable, as Sadiq Khan has proposed, and developments will become unviable. You'll end up with 50% of nothing. And I don't think you need to take my word for it. If you look at the targets set by the previous mayor, Ken Livingstone, he himself has admitted that he never once got close to reaching those targets. These housing policies, in my view, will mean construction grinding to a halt. We'll see fewer and more expensive homes as a result. So I appreciate the intent, but we need a workable solution, a more transparent viability process, an end to the backroom deals between the developers and the local councils. Fourth and finally, I don't know how much time I got. Fourth and finally, I want to mention something that I think is absolutely critical in this debate, and that is the urgent need to grow London's new transport infrastructure. Transport infrastructure is the single biggest driver of new homes being built in the capital, and nothing comes close to it. And just to take a few examples, the overground to Barking Riverside will release land for around 10,000 new homes. The Sutton Tram Link will make possible 20,000 homes that otherwise would not be built. Crossrail 2 is going to be an absolute game changer right across our capital. It will facilitate the building of up to 200,000 new homes on brownfield sites, and so on. We can build the homes we need. We can protect our precious green spaces, but only if we protect and expand London's transport infrastructure. And that is why I am so totally opposed to my Labour rivals' transport policy, which involves taking £1.9 billion out of the TfL budget, funds that we need like at no other time in our capital's history. I believe that proposal would be devastating for London, a transport black hole that makes building on the green belt virtually inevitable, a fantasy housing target that will mean less homes and more expensive homes. I think the choice at this election on May the 5th is clear between a Labour Party that is willing to experiment with London's future or a candidate who will work constructively with government, with the developers, with local communities and their representatives to deliver the homes Londoners desperately now need. If I'm elected mayor on May the 5th, I will stand up for Londoners. I'll do everything in my power to help solve the biggest housing crisis we have ever experienced. And I will do so working very, very closely with you here in this room. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to IPPR for today's event and for inviting me to say a few words. And thank you, Bob, and the other members of the Commission for producing this fantastic contribution to a very critical and current debate for Londoners. Your report is called Building a New Deal for London. A New Deal is precisely the kind of language that we need to be using to deal with the housing crisis in London. The original and most famous New Deal, of course, was that of Roosevelt and the Democrats. It dealt with relief, recovery, and reform. Given the serious state of London's housing, the same threes resonate today. Relief, finding a way to give typical Londoners real hope they'll find somewhere genuinely affordable and secure to live. Recovery, restoring house building to the levels we need as a city. Reform, but also making sure we build the genuinely affordable homes Londoners truly need. Bob's forward to the report captures the same messages I've been using in my campaign to be the next mayor of this great city. And can I just say, Bob, to be fair, I got there first. Bob rightly talks about the overcrowding, housing-induced poverty, the billions spent on housing benefit and temporary accommodation for homeless families. And he also highlights that as well as huge social problems for London, the capital's businesses are losing their competitive edge as they struggle to recruit and retain the staff they need to prosper. Estimates are that we need to build 50,000 homes a year to keep pace, but we're languishing around half that. What's more, we aren't building the right kind of homes either. There is rightly enormous pressure on each of us as candidates to be the Mayor of London to demonstrate that we get how big the problem is and that each of us has the ideas and solutions. And that's why this fantastic report, and I will be poring over the details shortly, is so crucial and so welcome. I hope in 58 days' time to be elected Mayor of this great city. My pitch to the voters is that I want to be a mayor for all Londoners. That means the millions of Londoners who need a decent and affordable home. That means the millions of Londoners renting privately, losing sleep worrying if their rent will be hiked or because they've no security of tenure, they'll be turfed out by their landlord. That means the Londoners who are fortunate to be on the housing ladder but worry about their children and grandchildren, whether they'll be able to afford to live nearby. That means the thousands living homeless on London's streets, a problem we thought we'd eradicated, but to our shame has returned with a vengeance. And it also means those running businesses in London, but struggling to find the talented and experienced staff they need because of the shortage of affordable housing. Each and every one of these needs a mayor who'll get to grips with London's housing crisis. And that's why May's election needs to be a referendum on the housing crisis. A cross in the box against my name means support for my detailed plans to sort out London's housing crisis. If elected, I'll lead a new team, Homes for Londoners, at City Hall, and I'll lead the broad alliance of those who want to build new homes for Londoners, councils, housing associations, commercial home builders, investors, businesses. You know, Transport for London, the mayor, you, owns land equivalent to 16 times Hyde Park. We need to be using some of that land to build genuinely affordable homes for Londoners. And by the way, we'd rather keep the freehold then sell it off in a fire sale. And we also need to stop homes being sold off to foreign investors before they've even been completed. These are homes, not gold bricks for investors overseas. And as Mayor, I'll establish a not-for-profit lettings agency across London that brings certainty and stability to landlords and to tenants, because for too long, those who rent privately have been ignored. Together, we'll make the case to government for the freedoms and powers we need to up London's games. If I'm elected, I don't want to lose a moment in getting on with my pledges, and that makes IPPR's report very timely and very useful. Many of the ideas in the report are those around which there is an emergent consensus that they are what London needs. Or in other words, Bob, I'll link the best ones. From the freedom for London government to decide what sort of homes we need, to the freedom to invest more of the capital's resources back into housing, improving infrastructure to open up sites for development. You know, Crossrail 1 will open in 2018 and 2019. I have the experience as a Crossrail minister to recognise there are lessons we can learn from this that will help us build more homes for Londoners. That's why we desperately need to give the green light to Crossrail 2. We need to extend our tram, DLR and tube services and take over the running of more of London's commuter lines. And we need to look at additional river crossings to the east of London. Infrastructure and housing go hand in hand. We'll set up a skills for Londoners to help training up today's youngsters for the skills of today and tomorrow. And that includes construction. And by the way, if we think there's a skills shortage now, just imagine what things will be like if we leave the European Union. From the power to get development going where it's stalled, and the power to build homes on the capital's public-owned lands, we need to have a stronger say over London's private rental sector. And these are the key freedoms and powers we need to get London building. And beyond upping the number of homes, IPPR's report also rightly suggests new powers to improve Londoners' experience of the private rented sector. Whilst we build more homes, we can't stand by and consign a generation to a lifetime of high rents and insecurity. We need to make sure that the gulf between what Londoners earn and what they spend on their home stops growing wider and wider. And by the way, we also need a mayor who will defend London's housing. That means a mayor that stands up for the homes we need, that stands up to the government whose recent plans risk damaging London's housing market. Take their plans to force councils to sell off affordable family homes to pay for extending right to buy, because no one at number 10 gave any thought to where the money was going to come from. And that could see 60,000 homes sold in London and £2.5 billion in receipts lost from our city. This government promised like-for-like replacements of sold council homes, but has only delivered one new home for every 7 sold off. That means standing up to the government whose idea, as Bob said, of affordable are £450,000 starter homes, which even with a discount and a 5% deposit leaves Londoners needing to earn £97,000 a year to afford one. Now, we've had a government for the last 6 years and a mayor for the last 8, whose first instinct is to sell off surplus public land for a one-off sum, rather than think long-term about the affordable homes we could build on that land and the revenue stream we as a city could generate in perpetuity to build more homes in the future. London needs a strong mayor, passionate about sorting out this city's housing crisis, and who'll stand up for Londoners. And the right mayor can deliver on a new deal for London. And we can make the case for that new deal most effectively when we speak together as one voice for London. So can I end, Bob, by saying, in setting out key ideas that may be part of that new deal, I very much welcome today's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me along today to give my response to this report. This, must have taken many, many hours and a huge amount of work, and I think it is really welcome, well-informed, and contributes in this timely debate on how we build the homes that London so desperately needs. And I'm really pleased that a large number of the recommendations reflect some of the measures and the policies that I've been calling for as a London Assembly member for the last 8 years and now as a mayoral candidate. And as the report highlights, the shortage of affordable homes in London is without question one of the most pressing issues facing the city, with over 500,000 people currently languishing on housing waiting lists. And for decades, London has failed to build enough new homes, driving up rents and putting property prices well beyond the reach of most ordinary Londoners. And this has been under governments of all colours. Everyone now agrees this must change if London is to retain its competitive edge on the international stage. And I strongly agree with the report's central conclusion that building more homes and more affordable homes is the only way to create the step change in supply needed to improve affordability in the capital for the long term. And it is particularly encouraging to see the Commission's confidence in London government and its ability to meet London's housing challenge, given, crucially, the right powers. But for me, the case for investing in social housing is particularly compelling, since these homes are allocated to those in the greatest housing need, often living in poor conditions which in themselves increase the demand on health, education and other services. And I'm also convinced that increasing the supply of social housing would generate significant savings to the public purse through alleviating the social costs associated with poor housing. And as the London Assembly found when they looked into the issue, just one new 6-bedroom home in London can help take more than 36 Londoners out of overcrowded conditions as other families are moved into larger vacant homes further down the chain of properties. Just one 6-bedroom property can do that. And that's why I've pledged to build 50,000 new council homes. And I do say the word council homes because I think we know what we mean. I'm not using affordable in that sort of stretched definition. 50,000 new council homes over the next 4 years, doubling the number that's built every year in London. And of course the challenge I faced in making this commitment, just like the challenge the Commission faced in seeking to double the supply of new homes, is how do we fund this proposal? Well, in the long term, the solution, as recommended by the Housing Commission, may be for taxes such as stamp duty, land tax to be devolved to London government, allowing it to shift more of its resources into housing capital investment over time. But in the short term, however, I have proposed a large-scale £2 billion programme of home building in London, funded by converting the existing £20 council tax precept that we're all still paying for the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games into a new housing fund, and in effect creating a housing precept we can borrow against. And if I'm elected, I will set a new budget with this priority at its centre. And at the same time, I've pledged to create a new London housing property company at City Hall, wholly owned by the GLA, to kickstart this programme, giving London government the means, once again, like the predecessors, the GLC and the LCC had, to directly commission London's affordable homes, something, again, the Commission calls for. But I recognise that in order to support the delivery of affordable homes on this scale, the next mayor would need to address the current shortage of construction skills across the capital. Something dear to my heart, as I often say, and my colleagues are all getting to know each other's speeches, but we hear a lot about someone being the son of a bus driver. I'm the daughter of a carpenter, somebody who worked in construction his whole life. I know how important these skills are and how for decades we have lost many of the skilled labourers that we need. So for this reason, I've put forward proposals for a new construction academy. As we saw for Crossrail, the new tunnelling academy, this would provide training in the key skills required to build the homes and the infrastructure London so desperately needs. So from bricklaying and plumbing to crane driving and surveying, this new state-of-the-art facility would address the current shortage of construction skills across the capital, offering every student the chance to gain nationally recognised qualifications and at the same time widening the skills base across the construction sector. But the call you have in your report for a long-term funding model and a new devolution deal to double the supply of new homes in London and to maintain this for at least the following 5 years is very welcome indeed, and it's absolutely crucial. You know, it's always seemed odd to me that capital investment in affordable housing, a resource which we know there is this long-term need, continues to be allocated by government on a really short-term basis, often only 3 years or so. As a result, we continue to see wide variations in the number of new affordable homes built from one year to the next, delivering it's typically backloaded towards the end of the investment cycle. And if you look at the current investment cycle, it highlights this perfectly. In 2014-15, just over 18,500 affordable housing completions in London. That's the highest number since the DCLG started reporting this in the early 90s. Though obviously we've got to meet 26,000 a year to meet London's housing needs, so it doesn't quite add up. But if you look in this year, 2015-2016, the forecast will be only 5,000 affordable housing completions, the lowest number since the DCLG started reporting. So we can see if you don't have that consistent flow of money, we don't have the consistent building that we need. And this stop-start funding really does no one any favours. So I completely agree with this important part of the report that investment must become more stable if we're to meet London's housing needs. On the topic of planning, which is in the report, I strongly endorse the Commission's proposal to give the Mayor's London Plan the same status as national planning policy, recognising what so many of us in this room know to be true, that London's housing market is completely and increasingly a separate market to the rest of the country. And what works outside London often makes no sense in the capital, particularly where we've got such demand on housing, and our pressures are very different. And if you look at the government's housing and planning bill, its efforts to support home ownership, really at the expense of low-cost rented housing, will have a seriously different and damaging effect on London's housing market. Now, one thing I note the Commission considered and rejected was the idea of establishing a new use class to support build-to-rent developments, concluding that a use class specifically for rental developments would apply unnecessary rigidity to London's housing market. But I think this is perhaps one area where I may have a different view to the Commission, having openly called for a new use class for affordable housing, giving local authorities the ability to protect certain land for affordable housing, a means of assessing the impact of development proposals on the supply of affordable housing, and the ability to better coordinate housing and planning functions locally. And, you know, the high cost of development land in urban areas is routinely used by developers to minimise their affordable housing contributions on ground of this financial viability. You know, in theory, land value is created by planning permission, and therefore if we bring in an affordable housing separate class, separated from the wider C3 planning class, land prices for affordable housing would fall to more realistic levels. And it would benefit local authorities in seeking to protect certain land for affordable housing, as well as ensuring developers are clear from the outset what is acceptable in planning terms. I think this could be a real game changer in terms of building affordable housing in London, and I'm very delighted that Liberal Democrat peers in the House of Lords are tabling an amendment to the Housing and Planning Bill on this very issue. Now, briefly, the private rented sector also covered in the report. I agree with landlord licensing, but I want to see this mandatory across London, with City Hall working with the boroughs to tackle road landlords, having that central team that can help boroughs with their prosecutions. Through this, I think we would actually be able to help raise standards. It would be a lever we could use to raise standards across the private rented sector to make sure that we have quality private rented housing alongside public housing. So to conclude, this is incredibly welcome, this report. It's incredibly timely. It advocates an awful lot of things I've been calling for and will give us all a lot of food for thought. And I really hope it does play a key role in putting housing at the centre of these elections, both for the Mayor and for the London Assembly. Thank you very much indeed.
Can I just add my thanks to, first of all, to Bob Kerslake and his fellow commissioners, Terry Alifat, Mark Clare, Christine Whitehead and Nick Walkley for making such a fantastic report. I think that the report itself is excellent, It's full of eye-catching proposals, a lot of common sense. There's so much hot air and impracticality in this industry. I think what we've got are some really tangible, practical proposals there. And what's been fascinating for me is to see how the candidates themselves are broadly supportive. And each of them have said in their own way how they welcome the report. Now, what I've got to lay the challenge down to the candidates is, you know, this report here, full of really good ideas. To what extent are you going to take on board those ideas and perhaps modify your policies as a result of seeing the contents of this? It'll be interesting to see how the debates over the next few weeks, how your positions change. Now, what is also fascinating is that it is going to be down to the next mayor to make many of these policies happen. But it isn't just down to the mayor. And again, this is a really interesting thing, I think. What it's going to depend on is collaboration between national government and local government. So we've got the mayor, national government, local government. And I've felt for years that these different groups don't work together. So this is an opportunity now for real collaboration to put together a long-term strategy. Because what we have to remember is that real estate, which is what housing is a very long-term asset. And it's very difficult if you keep on changing policy. So what we need is some long-term strategies here. Now, what's also very interesting for me is the level of interest that we've got here. We're playing to a packed house. You know, hopefully the number of people that we've got here is going to be a measure of the success that whichever one of you comes to power will enjoy in terms of achieving your housing objectives. What we've also had, we've had protesters as well, so what more could you want? You know, it just shows you what kind of level of interest here. I think what we all, you know, I can commend this report highly to you. I think it's a fantastic report. So it just leaves me now to thank the three candidates, Zach Goldsmith, Sadiq Khan and Caroline Pigeon for making your contributions, and for Josh Goodman for chairing.